4 letters. A pagan Roman governor wrote them. The Jewish priests begged him to change them. He refused. 300 years later, the empire that employed him knelt before those 4 letters. INRI. You think you know what it means. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Incorrect, or rather incomplete, because when you read those 4 letters in Hebrew, the actual language of the sign, something impossible appears. The secret name of God. The name that Jews cannot pronounce. The most sacred name in all of human history. Written above the head of a crucified carpenter. By a pagan Roman, who refused to change it. Who said, "What I have written, as if something greater than him was guiding his hand. Coincidence? In the next 50 minutes, you will discover 7 meanings of INRI that the church never told you. You will see how the sacred mathematics of the Hebrews encoded God's number in those letters. You will understand why the Templars engraved these letters on their swords before being burned alive for it. And you will discover what forbidden texts buried for 1,600 years reveal about the true meaning of the crucifixion. By the end of this video, you will never look at a crucifix the same way again. Impossible. This is what INRI really means, and it begins with a question that almost no one asks. The Gospel of John, chapter 19, verses 19 to 22, records a detail that most people completely overlook. A detail that, when you examine it carefully, reveals something extraordinary about what really happened that day on Golgotha. Let me give you some context. Jesus had already been condemned. He had already been flogged. He had already carried his cross, or at least part of it, through the streets of Jerusalem. He had already been nailed to the wood. And then Pilate ordered a sign to be placed above his head. This was standard Roman procedure. At every crucifixion, a titulus was placed, a placard declaring the condemned man's crime. It was part of the punishment, public humiliation. Jesus' sign read, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." And here is where something strange happens. The chief priests of Israel, the very ones who had pressured to get the execution, ran to Pilate with an urgent demand. "Do not write the King of the Jews," they said. "Write that he said, 'I am the King of the Jews.'" Do you see the difference? One version declares a fact, "This man is the King of the Jews." The other version reduces it to a personal claim. "This man said he was king," implying he was either a liar or a madman. It was a difference of just 4 words, a minor change on a piece of wood that would be destroyed in a matter of hours. Why did they care so much? Think about this for a moment. Pilate had just given in to the pressure of the crowd to crucify a man he himself had declared innocent. Not once, not twice. 3 times the Roman governor publicly said, "I find no crime in this man." And yet, he crucified him. He was a politician, a survivor, a man who knew exactly when to bend to power to maintain his position. His career depended on keeping the peace in one of the empire's most troublesome provinces. A Jewish uprising would be the end of his governorship, and possibly his life, so he gave in to the priests when they demanded Jesus' death. But when those same priests asked him to change 4 words on a piece of wood, suddenly, Pontius Pilate became absolutely immovable. His response was sharp, final, no room for negotiation. "What I have written, I have written." In Latin, quod scripsi, scripsi, final, absolute, irrevocable. Why? Why would a man who had proven to be completely pliable suddenly become inflexible over something seemingly insignificant? Roman historians give us some clues. Flavius Josephus, the 1st century Jewish historian who extensively documented this period, records multiple incidents where Pilate deliberately provoked and humiliated the Jewish population. On one occasion, he introduced standards bearing the emperor's image into Jerusalem, knowing full well that Jews considered this a violation of the law against idols. On another occasion, he used money from the temple treasury to build an aqueduct, provoking riots that were brutally suppressed. Pilate despised the Jews, and the feeling was mutual. So when the priests asked him to change the sign, Pilate probably saw a perfect opportunity to humiliate them once more. "You want me to change the sign? After everything you put me through today? After forcing me to execute an innocent man to satisfy your bloodlust? What I have written, I have written." It was an act of contempt, a small revenge, a way of saying, "You won the battle, but I will have the last word." But there is something deeper here, much deeper. The sign was not written only in Latin. The Gospel of John is explicit. It was written in 3 languages: Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, the 3 dominant languages of the ancient world. Anyone who passed by that cross, whether Jew, Roman, or Greek, could read exactly what it said. It was a universal message, a global proclamation. And what the priests understood, what made them run desperately to Pilate, was something the Roman governor probably never comprehended. Because when you read Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews in Hebrew, the first letters of each word form something no Jew could ignore, something the priests recognized immediately, something that filled them with terror. And that brings us to the first great revelation of this video. The official version is simple, the one they taught you in catechism, the one that appears in religious books, the one priests repeat every Good Friday. INRI are the initials of Iesus Nazarenus Rex Judaeorum, the Latin phrase meaning Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And it's true, but it's only half the story, because the sign was not written only in Latin. The Gospel of John chapter 19 verse 20 is absolutely explicit about this. And many of the Jews read this title because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the title was written in Hebrew, in Latin, and in Greek. 3 languages, 3 versions of the same message. Latin was the official language of the empire. Greek was the lingua franca of commerce and culture. But Hebrew was the sacred language, the language of the scriptures, the language of the prophets, the language in which God had spoken to Abraham, to Moses, to David. So the obvious question, the question almost no one asks, is, what did the sign say in Hebrew? According to studies by scholars like Dr. James Tabor, professor of religious studies at the University of North Carolina, the Hebrew inscription would have been Yeshua ha-Notzri v'Melech ha-Yehudim. Yeshua, Jesus. Ha-Notzri, the Nazarene, or of Nazareth. V'Melech, and King. Ha-Yehudim, of the Jews. Now look at the first letters of each word. Yeshua, Yod. Ha-Notzri, He. V'Melech, Vav. Ha-Yehudim, He. Y-H-V-H. Do you recognize those letters? Y-H-V-H. The Tetragrammaton. The unpronounceable name of God in Jewish tradition. The most sacred, most feared, most revered name in all the history of Judaism. The name God revealed to Moses at the burning bush when he asked, "What is your name?" And God answered, "I am who I am." YHVH, the Eternal One. The one who was, is, and will be. This name was so sacred that devout Jews did not even dare to pronounce it aloud. When it appeared in the scriptures during public reading, they would substitute Adonai, meaning Lord, or simply say Hashem, meaning the name. Pronouncing God's name was considered such a grave blasphemy that, according to tradition, it could be punished by death. Only the high priest could pronounce the name. And only once a year, on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, in the Holy of Holies of the temple, in solitude, in whispers. And that name, the most sacred name in all of Judaism, was formed by the first letters of the sign above Jesus' cross. Now you understand. Now you understand why the priests panicked. It was not simply that the sign proclaimed Jesus as king. There had been other messianic pretenders, other self-proclaimed kings that Rome had crushed without mercy. That was nothing new. What was different, what was absolutely intolerable, was that, read correctly in Hebrew, the sign was spelling out the sacred name of God. Above the head of a man, they considered a blasphemer, a man who was being executed precisely for claiming to be God. A man whose crime, according to them, was the worst possible blasphemy, identifying himself with YHVH. And now, the sign of his execution, visible to everyone, in the most public place possible, during one of the most crowded festivals of the year, was declaring exactly that. For anyone who could read Hebrew, and in Jerusalem, practically everyone could. The sign said, "This man is YHVH. This man is God himself." And who had written that declaration? Not a prophet, not a priest, not a disciple of Jesus. A pagan Roman, a man who probably had no idea what he had done. A man who did not know Hebrew, who did not understand the Jewish scriptures, who probably did not even know what the Tetragrammaton meant. Pilate wrote God's name above the cross of Jesus, without knowing it, without wanting it, without understanding it. And when the priest begged him to change it, when they explained, possibly with terror in their voices, what he had done, he answered, "What I have written, as if a force greater than himself was guiding his hand. as if the universe was conspiring to proclaim a truth that no human power could silence. The priests wanted to execute a blasphemer. Instead, the sign of his execution proclaimed his divinity. The irony is devastating. But this is only the first layer of hidden meaning in INRI. There is more, much more. Here is something you probably never noticed, something very few preachers mention from the pulpit. Something that, when you examine it carefully, reveals fascinating patterns about how the story of Jesus was transmitted. The four canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, record the sign on the cross differently. Not identically, differently. Look carefully. Matthew 27:37. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Mark 15:26. The King of the Jews. Luke 23:38. This is the King of the Jews. John 19:19. Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Four Gospels. Four distinct versions. How is this possible? Some critics have used these differences to question the reliability of the Gospels. If they can't agree on something as basic as what a sign said, how can we trust the rest? But this objection reveals a superficial understanding of how ancient texts worked. New Testament scholars, like Dr. Bart Ehrman from the University of North Carolina, point out that each evangelist wrote for a different audience. They had particular theological perspectives. They emphasized different aspects of the same event. They were not producing legal transcripts. They were proclaiming a message. Mark, considered the oldest gospel, presents the shortest version. The King of the Jews. No name, no origin. Just the title that Rome considered a crime of sedition. Direct, brutal, as was Mark's style. Matthew, writing primarily for a Jewish audience, adds, "This is Jesus," clearly identifying who the crucified man was for readers who needed to know that this Jesus was the same one who had preached in the synagogues of Galilee. Luke, writing for Gentiles, probably for a Roman official named Theophilus, says, "This is the King of the Jews," explaining the context for an audience unfamiliar with Jewish messianic expectations. But John is different. John is the only one who includes "of Nazareth," Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, and it is exactly that phrase, with "of Nazareth" included, that forms the acronym INRI in Latin. And it is exactly that phrase that, translated into Hebrew, spells YHVH. Coincidence? Consider this carefully. According to tradition preserved in the Gospel itself, John was the only one of the 12 apostles present at the foot of the cross. The text mentions it explicitly. The beloved disciple was there, standing next to Mary, the mother of Jesus. John saw the sign with his own eyes. John read the words in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. And John, unlike the other evangelists, was known in temple circles. The Gospel mentions that he had access to the high priest's house. This means he would have been familiar with Jewish mystical traditions. He would have immediately recognized what the letters formed. He would have understood the hidden meaning that was in plain sight for all, but that few had eyes to see. And it is precisely John who preserves the exact version that contains God's hidden name. While Matthew, Mark, and Luke, none of whom, according to tradition, were present at the crucifixion, record abbreviated or different versions. The eyewitness preserved the complete truth. The others preserved fragments. This is not a contradiction. It is a confirmation. John knew what he had seen. He understood what it meant, and he made sure that future generations would know it too. He wrote the exact version that reveals God's name, not by accident, by design. Now I want to take you to a dimension rarely explored in discussions about INRI, a dimension that connects the sign on the cross with prophecies written centuries before Jesus was born. Because the sign above the cross was not just a Roman administrative act. It was not just a label identifying a criminal. It was the fulfillment of prophecies that had awaited their moment for generations. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, verse 6, we find one of the most well-known and most cited messianic prophecies in all of the Hebrew Bible. "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." Look at those titles carefully. Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. These are not titles of a prophet. These are not titles of a teacher. These are not titles of a simple human king. These are titles of divine royalty. Mighty God, in Hebrew, El Gibor, is a title that in other parts of the Old Testament is used exclusively to refer to God himself. Everlasting Father in Hebrew, Avi Ad, implies eternity, something no human being possesses. The prophet was describing someone who would be simultaneously human, a child is born to us, and divine, mighty God. The prophet Zechariah, in chapter 9, verse 9, was even more specific about how this king would manifest. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king comes to you, righteous and having salvation, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Jesus fulfilled this literally. Days before his crucifixion, he entered Jerusalem riding on a young donkey, exactly as Zechariah had prophesied centuries earlier. The crowd received him with palm branches, shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David," a messianic title that recognized his royal lineage. And then the title King was officially placed above his head, not by a prophet who anointed him, not by a priest who crowned him, by Pontius Pilate, the pagan Roman governor who did not believe in Israel's prophecies, who did not know the Hebrew scriptures, who probably considered the whole matter of the Jews and their Messiah as an annoying Eastern superstition. And yet, it was he who wrote the title, King of the Jews, as if an invisible hand was guiding his, as if the prophecies demanded their fulfillment, regardless of the will of the human actors. But there is an even deeper connection to the Hebrew scriptures. In Psalm 22, written by King David approximately 1,000 years before Christ, we find a description that is astonishingly, disturbingly precise of what appears to be a crucifixion. Remember, when David wrote this, crucifixion did not even exist. Jews executed by stoning. Crucifixion was a later Roman invention, and yet David wrote, "They pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. They look and stare at me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots." The Gospels record that exactly this happened at the foot of Jesus' cross. The Roman soldiers divided Jesus' clothes, and they cast lots. They gambled for his tunic because it was seamless and they did not want to tear it. Literal fulfillment of a prophecy written 1,000 years before. And at the beginning of that same psalm, we find the words Jesus spoke from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When Jesus quoted this verse, he was not simply expressing despair, he was doing something any educated Jew would have immediately recognized. He was directing the attention of those present to the entire psalm. It was a common practice in rabbinic teaching, citing the first verse of a text to invoke the complete text. And Psalm 22 does not end in despair. It ends in triumph. All the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations shall worship before you. For the kingdom is the Lord's, and he rules over the nations. The INRI sign, from this prophetic perspective, was not a Roman mockery. It was the fulfillment of centuries of prophecies. The Hebrew scriptures announced it, history fulfilled it, and 4 letters on a cross proclaimed it to the world. To truly understand the explosive impact of INRI, you need to understand the political context in which those words were written. Because Judea in the 1st century was not just another province of the empire, it was a powder keg about to explode. The Romans had conquered the Promised Land in 63 BC, when General Pompey entered Jerusalem at the head of his legions, and Pompey committed an act that the Jews never, ever forgave. He entered the Holy of Holies of the Temple. This was the most sacred space in Judaism, the place where God's very presence dwelt, the place where only the high priest could enter once a year on the Day of Atonement. Pompey entered out of curiosity. He wanted to see what was inside. He wanted to see the God of the Jews. What he found was nothing, an empty room, because Jews did not worship idols or images. Pompey left disappointed, but the damage was done. The most sacred place in Israel had been profaned by a pagan. And from that day, Jewish resentment toward Rome never stopped burning. For devout Jews, Rome was not simply a political oppressor. It was not simply a foreign conqueror. Rome was the last of the prophetic beasts described by Daniel, the 4th empire that would be destroyed when God established his eternal kingdom. Jews studied the prophecies of Daniel and Ezekiel, calculated the times, awaited divine intervention, and for generations, all that hope had centered on one figure, the Messiah, the Mashiach, the anointed one of God, the descendant of David. the king who would liberate Israel and establish God's kingdom on earth. But here is what's crucial, what changes everything when you understand the context. Most Jews of the 1st century expected a warrior Messiah, a military king, a liberator who would drive out the Romans with sword and fire, just as the Maccabees had defeated the Greek oppressors centuries before. The historian Flavius Josephus, who lived in this period and exhaustively documented Jewish history, records multiple messianic uprisings during this era. Men who proclaimed themselves the Messiah, who gathered armed followers, who promised liberation, and all were crushed by the Roman legions. Judas the Galilean, Simon of Perea, Athronges the shepherd, Theudas the magician, all ended the same, dead, and their followers scattered or crucified. Rome was constantly alert to any movement that could destabilize its control over this troublesome province. And then Jesus appeared, a preacher from Galilee, the most rebellious region of Judea, who attracted massive crowds, a man who constantly spoke of the kingdom of God, language that to Roman ears sounded dangerously political, a man who entered Jerusalem while the people shouted messianic acclamations and called him Son of David. To Pilate, this smelled like sedition. And the crime of sedition was punished by crucifixion, the most humiliating, most painful, most public death that Rome had invented, reserved for slaves, for rebels, for those Rome wanted to make an example of. The INRI sign was an integral part of that punishment. By publicly declaring that Jesus was being executed for claiming to be king of the Jews, Rome was sending a clear message to the entire population. This is what happens to anyone who challenges our authority. This is what happens to your kings. This is what will happen to you if you dare to rebel. It was imperial propaganda. It was state terrorism. It was a warning carved in flesh and blood. But Rome did not understand who they were dealing with. They thought they were crucifying another failed messianic pretender. They thought they were extinguishing another minor rebel movement. Instead, they were participating, unknowingly, in the central event of human history. And the sign that was meant to be a mockery, a humiliation, a warning, became a proclamation of truth. Because Jesus was not the kind of king Rome feared. He was something much more dangerous, a king whose kingdom could not be destroyed by legions, a king whose throne was a cross, and whose crown was made of thorns. 300 years later, the Roman Empire, the very empire that crucified him, would kneel before him. Emperor Constantine would become a follower of the crucified one. Christianity would become the official religion of the empire, and the churches of Rome would carry the letters INRI above their altars. Rome lost, the crucified one won. But the connection to the Tetragrammaton is not the only interpretation of INRI that has survived the centuries. There is another reading, preserved in medieval mystical traditions, that adds a completely different layer of meaning, a layer that the institutional church preferred to ignore or perhaps suppress. According to alchemical and Kabbalistic texts dating from the 12th century onward, INRI was also understood as the abbreviation of a completely different Latin phrase, Igne Natura Renovatur Integra, which translated means, by fire, nature is renewed completely. This interpretation appears documented in multiple European mystical treatises, including works attributed to Paracelsus, the famous Swiss physician and alchemist of the 16th century. It also appears in Rosicrucian texts of the 17th century and in later Masonic rituals. But what does this phrase really mean? In the mystical tradition, fire is not simply physical fire. It is a symbol of spiritual purification, of radical transformation, of death of the old self and birth of the new. It is not a fire that destroys to annihilate. It is a fire that consumes everything impure, everything false, everything that separates us from the divine, so that only the essence remains, the spiritual gold. According to this interpretation, the sign on the cross prophetically declared what Jesus' sacrifice meant, a complete renewal of human nature through the purifying fire of his passion and death. It is fascinating that fire appears constantly throughout the scriptures as a symbol of divine presence. Moses found God in a bush that burned but was not consumed, fire that does not destroy but reveals. The pillar of fire guided Israel through the desert for 40 years, fire that illuminates the way. Elijah was taken to heaven in a chariot of fire, fire that transforms and elevates. At Pentecost, the Holy Spirit descended upon the apostles as tongues of fire, fire that empowers and sends. And here, according to medieval mystics, fire appears encoded in the very sign of the cross. The traditions preserved in the Zohar, the central text of Jewish Kabbalah, compiled in the 13th century, speak extensively of the transformative power of divine fire. Although the Zohar is a Jewish text, many scholars have documented how Kabbalistic ideas profoundly influenced medieval Christian mysticism. Christian alchemists studied the Kabbalah. Rosicrucians incorporated Hebrew symbolism. Early Masons ritualized concepts that came from both traditions. What this suggests is extraordinary. From the earliest centuries, there were believers who saw in INRI not just an identification of the crucified one, but a key to deeper spiritual mysteries. Mysteries that were gradually marginalized as the institutional church established an official doctrine, but they never completely disappeared. They survived in hidden manuscripts, in oral traditions passed from master to disciple, in symbols carved in medieval cathedrals where untrained eyes would never notice them. And today they are emerging again into the light for those who have eyes to see. If these revelations are shaking what you thought you knew, imagine how much more remains hidden. INRI is just one of the Christian symbols that means something completely different when you read them correctly. There is more, much more. That's why I prepared something special for those who really want to go deeper. The secrets that the church eliminated from the scriptures. A complete digital book where I reveal truths that were systematically hidden for centuries. This video you're watching, with everything you've learned about INRI, is just a preview of what you'll find there. The link is in the first pinned comment. But I warn you, this content has been removed before. There are truths that disturb powerful people. Download it now while it's still available. And if you do, come back here and write "awakened" in the comments. I want to know how many true seekers there are in this community. Now let's continue with the revelations that remain. And now we come to one of the most mathematically fascinating revelations about INRI, a revelation that connects the sign on the cross with an ancient practice that Jews have used for millennia to discover hidden meanings in the scriptures. It's called gematria. In Jewish tradition, gematria is the art, some would say the science, of finding hidden meanings in words through their numerical values. It works like this. In Hebrew, each letter has an assigned numerical value. Aleph, the first letter, equals 1. Bet equals 2. Gimel equals 3, and so on. This was not a marginal or esoteric practice. It was an integral part of how Jewish scribes and sages studied the scriptures. Rabbis looked for connections between words that added up to the same value. They found numerical patterns that revealed layers of meaning invisible to superficial reading. Now consider the Tetragrammaton, YHVH, the sacred name we saw hidden in INRI. Let's calculate its numerical value. Yod equals 10. He equals 5. Vav equals 6. He equals 5 total, 26. The number 26. This number is not just any number in Jewish tradition. It is considered the number of the divine name, the number of God himself. It appears repeatedly in significant connections throughout the Hebrew scriptures. Kabbalists have dedicated entire volumes to exploring the mystical ramifications of the number 26. Now, here is where it gets extraordinary. When you take the first letters of each word in the Hebrew inscription of the sign, Yeshua Hanotzri Vemelech HaYehudim, you get exactly the letters YHVH, and those letters add up to 26. It's as if the sign was mathematically coded to declare, "This man is God." The first Christians, many of them Jews educated in these traditions, familiar with gematria since childhood, would have immediately recognized these numerical connections. For them, it was not coincidence, it was divine design. Now, some skeptics argue that these patterns can be found in any text if you search long enough, and it's a valid objection. The human mind is skilled at finding patterns, even where they don't exist. But what makes the INRI coincidences particularly remarkable is that we are not talking about a single isolated pattern. We are talking about multiple layers of meaning that align perfectly. Linguistic layer. The first letters form YHVH, the name of God. Numerical layer. Those letters add up to 26, the number of the divine name. Theological layer. They declare the divine identity of Jesus, exactly what he claimed to be. Prophetic layer. They fulfill the Hebrew scriptures about the King Messiah. Historical layer. They were written by a pagan who had no intention of fulfilling any prophecy. All these layers point in the same direction. They converge on the same message, as if someone had designed the sign so that every level of reading, every method of analysis, every perspective would reveal the same fundamental truth. The man on that cross was God incarnate, and mathematics proves it. In December 1945, something extraordinary happened in Upper Egypt, something that would forever change our understanding of early Christianity. A peasant named Muhammad Ali al-Saman was digging for sabak, a natural fertilizer, near the town of Nag Hammadi, when his mattock struck something solid. It was a sealed clay jar, almost a meter tall. Muhammad Ali hesitated to open it. Local legends spoke of jinns, spirits, trapped in ancient jars. What if he released something evil? But curiosity and the possibility of finding gold overcame fear. He broke the jar. He did not find gold. He did not find jinns. He found books. 13 leather codices, books bound in the ancient style, with texts written in Coptic, the language of Christian Egypt, texts that had remained hidden, buried, forgotten for more than 1,600 years. It was one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, perhaps the most important for the history of Christianity since the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. These texts, known today as the Nag Hammadi Library, included Gospels, Apocalypses, and philosophical treatises that were never included in the official Bible, texts that the 4th century church had declared heretical, texts that were ordered destroyed, texts that were believed to have disappeared forever, and some of these texts contained radically different perspectives on the crucifixion. Dr. Elaine Pagels, professor of religion at Princeton University, has dedicated decades of her career to studying these texts. Her books, such as The Gnostic Gospels, have revolutionized our understanding of the diversity of early Christianity. What she found at Nag Hammadi challenges many assumptions about what the first Christians actually believed. For example, the Apocalypse of Peter, one of the Nag Hammadi texts, presents a vision of the crucifixion completely different from the traditional one. In this text, Jesus appears to be observing his own crucifixion from outside, standing, serene, laughing, while the Romans nail another to the cross, a substitute, an illusion, a material body that the true spiritual Jesus had already abandoned. For the Gnostics who wrote these texts, the meaning of INRI would have been completely different from the Orthodox meaning. It was not just a sign identifying a criminal, it was part of a cosmic drama where what appeared to be a defeat was actually a transcendent victory. The Treatise on the Resurrection, another Nag Hammadi text, describes Jesus' death as a transformation, not a destruction. The physical body was like a garment that the divine being removed to reveal his true glorious nature. The cross was not a place of defeat, but a portal of liberation. Why were these texts excluded from the biblical canon? Why were they buried and forgotten? During the first centuries of Christianity, there were multiple currents of thought competing to define what it meant to follow Jesus. There were Jewish Christians who insisted on keeping the law of Moses. There were Gnostic Christians who emphasized secret spiritual knowledge. There were Christians who believed Jesus was only human, and others who believed he was only divine. Eventually, the bishops who favored a more literal, more institutional, more hierarchical interpretation won the debate. In the 4th century, with the support of Emperor Constantine, they established what would become official orthodoxy. The Gnostic texts were declared heretical. Their destruction was ordered. Those who possessed them were persecuted. For nearly 2 millennia, it was believed that these alternative voices of early Christianity had disappeared forever, until an Egyptian peasant, looking for fertilizer, unearthed a clay jar, and the world discovered that the hidden truths of early Christianity had survived, waiting, keeping silence, until the right moment to emerge again. Is this that moment? During the medieval Crusades, a military order arose that would change the history of Europe forever. An order shrouded in mystery, power, and controversy. An order that accumulated incalculable wealth, that built magnificent cathedrals, that developed the first international banking system, and an order that was destroyed in a brutal and mysterious way, the Knights Templar. Founded around 1119 by 9 French knights, their official purpose was to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. But the Templars quickly became something much greater. In less than 2 centuries, They were one of the most powerful and mysterious organizations in the medieval world. They had lands throughout Europe. They commanded armies. They lent money to kings. And they had a practice that has fascinated historians and seekers of mysteries for centuries. They engraved INRI on their swords and shields. The official explanation was simple. It was a declaration of faith as they marched into battle, a reminder that they fought for Christ. But the preserved traditions, some in documents, others in the memory of secret societies that claim to descend from the Templars, suggest something deeper. The Templars, during nearly 200 years in the Holy Land, had extensive contact with traditions that Christian Europe did not know. Jewish mystical traditions, the first whispers of what would later be called Kabbalah. Eastern Christian traditions, currents that had preserved teachings different from those of Rome. Islamic traditions, the Sufis, the mystics of Islam, with whom some Templars apparently developed relationships of mutual respect. Their headquarters was located on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, above the ruins of the ancient Temple of Solomon, the most sacred building in Jewish history. According to some historians, the Templars excavated extensively beneath the Temple Mount. What did they find? No one knows for certain. Some say they found the Ark of the Covenant. Others speak of the Holy Grail. Others mention documents that revealed suppressed truths about Jesus and the first Christians. What we do know is that after those excavations, the Templars changed. They developed secret rituals, practices that differed from the Catholic orthodoxy of their time, knowledge they guarded jealously, even from other Christians. In 1307, on Friday the 13th of October, a day that would be marked in collective memory as synonymous with bad luck, King Philip IV of France ordered the simultaneous arrest of all Templars in his kingdom. They were accused of heresy, of worshipping strange idols, of practicing blasphemous rituals, of denying Christ. Under torture, many confessed to crimes that modern historians like Malcolm Barber, author of The New Knighthood, consider fabricated. The order was officially dissolved in 1312 by Pope Clement V. Its last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned alive in 1314. According to legend, before dying, he cursed the king and the pope, prophesying that both would die within a year. Both died, but the Templar traditions did not die with them. The knowledge survived, in secret circles, in initiatic societies that claim to preserve the original teachings, and in these later traditions, Rosicrucians, Masons, and others, INRI appears repeatedly, not just as the initials of the Roman sign, but as Igne Natura Renovatur Integra, the fire that renews nature, an alchemical motto that supposedly dated back to the Templars themselves. Did they know interpretations of INRI that the official church had suppressed? Did they engrave those letters on their swords, knowing they contained esoteric meanings beyond the catechetical explanation? Did they carry with them, into every battle, a secret that connected them with ancestral truths? We cannot know for certain. What we do know is that for the Templars, INRI was important enough to carry engraved on the steel with which they fought and died, as a talisman, as a protection, as a declaration of truths they were willing to defend with their lives, and for which eventually they were burned alive. We have traveled together through 2,000 years, 2,000 years of history, mystery, persecution, and revelation. You have discovered that 4 simple letters, INRI, contain layers of meaning that 99% of Christians will never know. The sacred name of God hidden in Hebrew, the alchemical fire that renews nature, the numerical code that adds up to 26, the number of the divine name, the fulfilled prophecies of Isaiah, Zechariah, and David, the secrets the Templars took to their graves, the alternative truths preserved in the Nag Hammadi texts, every layer pointing in the same direction, every revelation confirming the others. But there is something that transcends all these intellectual interpretations, something deeply, intensely personal. Because when Pontius Pilate, a Roman politician, a pagan, a man who probably despised everything Jesus represented, wrote, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews," he was, perhaps unknowingly, making a declaration that transcends every cultural, religious, and temporal barrier. He was declaring that the God of the universe, the creator of galaxies, the sustainer of all life, had become human, that he had been born in an insignificant town called Bethlehem, that he had grown up in a despised village called Nazareth, that he had lived a life of poverty, walking dusty roads, sleeping outdoors, depending on the generosity of strangers, that he had touched lepers when no one else dared, that he had eaten with sinners when the religious rejected them, that he had defended prostitutes from crowds who wanted to stone them, and that he had chosen to die, not in a palace surrounded by comforts, but on a Roman cross, surrounded by criminals, as the vilest of the condemned. Why? The Christian traditions of all ages, of all denominations, of all cultures, agree on one answer: for love. A love so vast it encompasses all of human history, past, present, and future. So deep it reaches into the darkest, most shameful, most hidden parts of the human soul. So tenacious that neither the betrayal of his friends, nor the torture of his enemies, nor death itself could destroy it. INRI is not just a historical acronym. It is not just an intellectual puzzle for scholars and seekers of mysteries. It is an invitation to look deeper, to question the superficial narratives we have been told, to seek the truths that remain hidden beneath layers of tradition, politics, and institutional interest, and above all to find or re-find the man who hung beneath that sign. Not the Jesus of religious postcards, domesticated and predictable, not the Jesus of institutions used to justify wars and oppress peoples, but the real Jesus, the revolutionary rabbi who challenged the powerful of his time, the healer who touched the untouchables, the friend of prostitutes and tax collectors, the one who overturned the tables of the money changers in the temple because they had turned his father's house into a den of thieves, the one who looked death in the eyes from that cross and conquered it, that Jesus, the one who still today, 2,000 years later, offers transformation to anyone who dares to seek him, because the fire that renews nature did not go out 2,000 years ago. It still burns. And the next time you see those four letters, in a church, on a crucifix, in a Renaissance painting, remember everything you now know. Remember that beneath the surface of the obvious, there are depths waiting to be explored. Remember that truth, though hidden for centuries, though persecuted and suppressed, always finds its way to the light. Remember that God's name was written above the head of a crucified carpenter by a pagan who refused to erase it. And remember that you, yes, you who made it to the end of this video, you who had the patience and curiosity to listen, are now a guardian of knowledge that millions do not know. Use it wisely. You have just discovered truths that 99% of Christians will never know. The question is, what do you do now? Option 1, go back to your normal life. Pretend you didn't see this. Forget what you learned. Option 2, go deeper. Keep searching. Become someone who knows. If you chose option 2, the digital book is in the first pinned comment. The secrets that the church eliminated from the scriptures. Download it now, before they remove it, because it has happened before. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, because this is just the beginning. The next video will reveal even more impactful truths about symbols you see every day without understanding their true meaning. And if you really feel the call to go where most don't dare, consider becoming a member of the channel. The Guardians of Truth, the members, are already accessing knowledge that I will never be able to make public. Revelations too dangerous for YouTube. See you on the other side. Thank you for watching until the end. Thank you for being a seeker of truth. We'll meet in the next video.